By day, Mr. Krabs was the cheerful, money-hungry owner of the Krusty Krab. Everyone in Bikini Bottom knew him as a hard worker who loved nothing more than counting his beloved cash. He laughed with customers, flipped patties, and bragged about his riches. Life was good, and the Krusty Krab was always busy. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, something dark and terrifying happened. As night fell, a change came over Mr. Krabs. His cheery smile twisted into a sinister grin, and his eyes began to glow an eerie, unnatural red. His claws, once used for flipping burgers, grew sharper, and a deep, unsettling hunger took over him. This wasn't a hunger for food or money. It was a craving for something far more sinister. Each night, just after closing time, Mr. Krabs would lock up the Krusty Krab, humming a happy tune. But as he stepped outside, the darkness consumed him. His mind clouded, filling with disturbing thoughts and a need for violence he couldn't resist. He became a predator, prowling the streets of Bikini Bottom, searching for his next victim. The first to go was Old Man Jenkins, who was heading home after a long day. Mr. Krabs spotted him shuffling down a quiet street, and without a second thought, followed him into the shadows. Jenkins never stood a chance. With a swift, brutal swipe of his sharpened claw, Mr. Krabs silenced him forever. The poor old man never even saw it coming. The next morning, Mr. Krabs woke up in his cozy bed, completely unaware of the horrors he'd committed the night before. As he stretched and yawned, he noticed something strange. His claws were stained with a dark, sticky substance, but in his morning days he shrugged it off, assuming he must have spilled some ketchup while counting his money. He got dressed, put on his usual grin, and headed to the Krusty Krab as if nothing had happened. As the days passed, more and more residents of Bikini Bottom went missing. Pearl, his daughter, started to notice the strange happenings. "Dad, have you heard about all these disappearances?" she'd ask, her voice trembling with worry. But Mr. Krabs, with no memory of his nighttime rampages, would just chuckle and wave it off. "Ah, don't worry, lass, it's probably just a rumor." But the truth was far darker. Each night, as the moon rose, Mr. Krabs would lose himself to the evil within, hunting down anyone who crossed his path. His victims never had a chance. Their lives ended by the very claws that served them delicious Krabby Patties by day. The people of Bikini Bottom started locking their doors, too afraid to venture out after dark. But even that wasn't enough. Mr. Krabs was relentless, driven by a force he couldn't control. The eerie part was how normal everything seemed during the day. Mr. Krabs would go about his business, laughing and joking as if nothing was wrong. But every night the darkness called to him, turning him into a cold-blooded killer. He was like two different creatures trapped in one body, the friendly, Krusty Krab owner and the murderous monster of the night. One evening, SpongeBob decided to stay late to clean up the kitchen. As the hours passed, the sun set, and the restaurant grew quiet. SpongeBob, lost in his work, didn't notice the change in Mr. Krabs at first, but then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw his boss standing in the doorway, staring at him with those horrible, glowing red eyes. "SpongeBob, my boy," Mr. Krabs said, his voice low and chilling. "It's getting late. You should head home." SpongeBob felt a shiver run down his spine. There was something terribly wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. "Oh, okay, Mr. Krabs," he stammered, grabbing his things and hurrying out the door. As soon as SpongeBob left, Mr. Krabs's twisted grin returned. His mind, now fully overtaken by darkness, urged him to follow his loyal employee. But something inside him, some tiny fragment of his old self, held him back. For the first time, Mr. Krabs struggled against the urge to kill. But the next night he wasn't so lucky. The darkness within him grew stronger, more relentless, and there was no resisting it. He hunted again, his victims growing more random, more brutal. Bikini Bottom was gripped with fear, yet no one suspected the kindly old Krabs. How could they? He was just a simple restaurant owner who loved money. The cycle continued night after night, with Mr. Krabs waking up each morning, blissfully unaware of the blood on his claws. He'd greet his customers with a hearty laugh, serve them their meals, and then, as night fell, turn into the monster that haunted their nightmares. One night, when the moon was particularly full and bright, Mr. Krabs found himself standing outside SpongeBob's pineapple house. He raised his claw, ready to strike, but something stopped him. A memory, faint and distant, of happier times. For a brief moment, the darkness receded, and Mr. Krabs saw what he'd become. Horrified, he backed away, fleeing into the shadows. The next morning, Mr. Krabs woke up shaking, his heart pounding with a fear he didn't understand. For the first time, he felt a deep, unsettling sense of dread. But as the sun rose higher in the sky, that feeling faded, and he brushed it off, heading to the Krusty Krab with his usual grin. But deep down, something had changed. The cycle of horror continued, but now, somewhere in the back of his mind, Mr. Krabs knew. He knew that when night fell, the monster would return, and he would once again become the killer that stalked the streets of Bikini Bottom. And there was nothing he could do to stop it.